0137. 4 drones cross into Russian airspace, heading northwest toward Pskov Oblast. They are 500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, flying low, threading through gaps in a radar network that used to be airtight. Used to be. Below them, in the city of Velikolukskaya, 15 fuel storage tanks sit in neat rows at an oil depot on Liteinaya Street. Diesel, gasoline, petroleum products bound for gas stations, army trucks, and transport companies across the northwest. The depot belongs to Pskovnefteprodukt, a subsidiary of Surgutneftegaz, one of the largest oil companies in Russia, run by a billionaire who has held the job since 1984 and rarely leaves his hometown of Surgut. His fuel depot, however, is about to make international news. Someone in Moscow had decided this place was worth protecting. And looking at the satellite imagery from December 14th, you can see why they were confident. Steel cables, 8 millimeters thick, stretched across the tops of the fuel tanks in a web pattern, mounted on tall support structures, spaced 60 centimeters apart. Anti-drone netting, the kind that had been going up over refineries and oil depots across Russia for the past year. The kind that actually worked in Stavropol back in November. The kind that made a military planner look at a satellite photo and think, problem solved. They were right about one thing. This depot was a target. SBU Alpha, Ukraine's elite deep strike unit, had hit it before, back in 2024. Minor damage, a warning shot. And Russia responded exactly the way Alpha expected. They built a cage over the fuel tanks and went back to sleep. But the drones now crossing into Pskov Oblast were not the same drones that came in 2024. And the people who built them had spent months studying every centimeter of those satellite photos, the same ones that made Moscow feel safe. They knew the cable thickness. They knew the spacing. They knew exactly where the netting was weakest. 4 drones, 4 points of failure, and a defense system about to meet an enemy it was never designed to stop. To understand why Moscow thought the netting would hold, you have to go back to 2024, the year Ukraine's drone campaign turned Russia's oil sector into a permanent fire hazard. 371 strikes on Russian territory that year. 81 of them hit refineries. Insurance industry estimates put the damage at 1 trillion rubles, roughly $13 billion. Refining output dropped to its lowest level since 2012. Russia wasn't just losing fuel, it was losing the war of economics. So Moscow did what any bureaucracy does when the budget is bleeding. It launched a program. By mid-2025, 60 to 80% of civilian energy facilities had some form of anti-drone protection. Nets, shelters, guns, interceptor drones, even experimental laser systems. On paper, it looked like a national shield. In practice, it was a supply chain running through Beijing. Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service had the receipts. A significant share of the protective equipment, the nets, the mounting hardware, the electronic countermeasures, was manufactured in China. Official procurement documents listed Russian companies as suppliers. The equipment inside the crates told a different story. And the intelligence service flagged 2 problems that would prove fatal in Velikolukskaya. First, the systems did not meet their declared specifications. The tensile strength, the mesh density, the load tolerance, on paper, impressive. In the field, unreliable. Second, even when the equipment was adequate, it was frequently installed incorrectly. Wrong mounting angles, insufficient anchor points, gaps where there shouldn't be gaps. This is the defender's curse. You can design the perfect net in a laboratory, but you need thousands of workers to install thousands of nets across hundreds of facilities spanning 11 time zones. Quality control doesn't scale like that. Somewhere between the Chinese factory floor and a fuel depot in Pskov, the margin of safety quietly evaporated. And SBU Alpha wasn't coming for the net first. They were coming for the thing that was supposed to make the net unnecessary. The Pantsir S-1, NATO calls it the Greyhound, is the backbone of Russia's point defense. 12 surface-to-air missiles, 2 30mm autocannons pumping 2,500 rounds per minute per barrel, a phased array radar that tracks 20 targets at 32 kilometers, an engagement envelope that stretches from 200 meters out to 20 kilometers, ground level to 15,000. On a spec sheet, it is the most dangerous thing a drone can meet. $15 to $20 million of engineering designed for exactly one job: killing small, slow, low-flying objects. Which is precisely why SBU Alpha made killing Pantsirs its first job. The logic is elegant. A Pantsir battery sitting outside a refinery doesn't just protect that refinery. It projects a 20-kilometer bubble of denial around it, a zone where any drone flying below 10,000 feet has a life expectancy measured in seconds. Stack enough Pantsirs across a region and you create a radar blanket with no seams. No way through, no corridor, no mission. So Alpha decided to rip the blanket apart. In 2025, Alpha destroyed half of every Pantsir system Russia lost that year. Not a typo. A single special operations unit, drone operators, intelligence analysts, and mission planners accounted for 50% of Russia's Pantsir kills. $4 billion worth of air defense, eliminated by a unit that doesn't wear rank insignia or hold press conferences. They hunted Pantsirs the way a boxer cuts the legs, patiently, methodically, knowing that every battery that burns is a hole that cannot be patched. Russia doesn't have a factory line fast enough to replace what Alpha takes. Earlier that month, Alpha had sent drones 1,700 kilometers deep into Russia to hit an oil refinery in Komi Republic. That wasn't just a strike, it was a proof of concept. If they could reach Komi, Pskov was a short commute. By the night of February 18th, the air corridor into Pskov Oblast was open. The Pantsirs that should have been guarding the depot were already scrap metal. All that stood between Alpha's drones and 15 fuel tanks was a web of steel cable and a prayer. Here's the thing about anti-drone netting. It works on a simple assumption. The drone comes in slow, hits the cables, and either bounces off or gets tangled. The warhead detonates above the tank instead of inside it. Shrapnel hits steel mesh instead of fuel. The math checks out, as long as the drone cooperates. Alpha's drones did not cooperate. The netting over the Velikolukskaya depot was designed to stop what engineers call a grazing impact, a slow-moving UAV drifting down at a shallow angle, the way early-generation kamikaze drones typically attack. But a drone diving at a steep angle with velocity behind it doesn't graze, it punches. 8mm cable can absorb a glancing blow from a 30-kilogram airframe. It cannot absorb a direct, high-speed strike aimed at the weakest point of the structure, the junction where cables meet the support frame. The first drone hit at 0141. It tore through the netting and struck the tank beneath it. Diesel ignited. And this is where physics turned the entire defense concept inside out. Burning petroleum products reach temperatures north of 1,000 degrees Celsius. Steel cable loses half its tensile strength at 600. The fire didn't just destroy the tank. It ate the netting around the point of impact, peeling it back like paper. Where there had been a web of steel, there was now a widening hole with flames pouring through it. The second drone arrived minutes later. No netting to stop it. Clean entry, second explosion. Third drone, fourth drone. 4 strikes, 4 tanks burning. 300 meters south, a woman stepped outside a meat processing plant and saw the sky on fire. The video, shaky, chaotic, voices screaming over each other, captured the moment. Workers running, someone shouting directions, and one voice, cutting through the noise like a siren. Vietnam, run! If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because Moscow is about to wake up and explain how none of this happened. Hit like, subscribe, and let's get back to it. Within an hour, the depot was fully engulfed, flames visible for kilometers. Emergency crews responded, but there was nothing to save. The fuel that was supposed to supply gas stations and army convoys across the northwest was now a column of black smoke rising over Pskov Oblast. Total cost of the 4 drones that did this? Somewhere between $8,000 and $20,000. 7 hours earlier, inside the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva, men in suits were discussing how to stop the killing. The third round of trilateral talks, Washington, Kyiv, Moscow, had wrapped up on February 18th after 2 days of negotiations. The American delegation was led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Ukraine sent Rustem Umerov. Russia sent Vladimir Medinsky, a man known less for diplomacy, and more for delivering maximalist demands with a straight face. Day 1 lasted 5 hours. Day 2, barely 2. Not a good sign, according to anyone who has ever sat in a negotiation room. Zelensky called it progress on the military track. Medinsky called it difficult but businesslike. What neither mentioned was that as the delegations filed out of the Intercontinental, Alpha's drones were already airborne, crossing into Russian territory on a heading that had been programmed days before anyone sat down at the table. That's the thing about deep strike operations. You don't plan them over lunch. The target packages, the route mapping, the corridor clearance. That work started weeks before Geneva. Diplomats talk timelines, operators work timelines. And on the night of February 18th, those two timelines collided over Pskov. By morning, Moscow had its version ready. The Russian Defense Ministry announced it had intercepted and destroyed 113 Ukrainian drones overnight. The statement listed regions: Rostov, Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod. Pskov Oblast did not appear, not once, as if the column of smoke visible from the Belarusian border 50 kilometers away was someone else's problem. Governor Velikolukskaya took a different approach. He posted on social media that drones had attacked civilian infrastructure facilities in Velikolukskaya, a depot that stores diesel and gasoline for military logistics, owned by a company that fuels army transport routes across the Northwest, and the governor framed it as a civilian target. He confirmed a fuel tank was on fire. He reported no casualty. He did not mention the netting. He did not mention that this was the second time Alpha had come for the same depot, and that everything Russia built to stop them had failed. 113 drones shot down. Zero mention of the one place that was actually burning. Velikolukskaya was not a turning point. It was a demonstration, a proof that Russia has run out of answers to a question Ukraine keeps asking in new ways. Think about what Moscow tried. Active defense, Pantsir batteries ringing every high-value target, radar networks scanning every altitude. Alpha hunted them down, one by one, until half the fleet was gone and the corridors were wide open. Passive defense, steel nets over fuel tanks, physical barriers that don't need operators or electricity or ammunition. Alpha studied the engineering, found the structural limits, and sent drones that turned the defense into fuel for its own destruction. Information defense, claim 113 kills and hope no one notices the depot that's still on fire. The internet noticed. 3 layers of protection, 3 failures. And the fundamental problem isn't execution, it's math. Russia has thousands of energy facilities spread across the largest country on Earth. Every refinery, every depot, every pipeline junction needs protection. That means Pantsirs, netting, electronic warfare, personnel, maintenance, resupply for every single site, every single night. The cost is astronomical and the coverage is never complete. Alpha needs to find one gap, one depot where the Pantsir was redeployed last week, one stretch of netting where the Chinese cables didn't meet spec, one night when the radar operator was looking the wrong direction. The attacker chooses the time, the place, and the method. The defender guesses. This is what asymmetric warfare looks like when it scales. Not a single spectacular raid, but a grinding, methodical campaign. 160 successful strikes in a year, each one bleeding a little more fuel, a little more money, a little more confidence from a war machine that runs on all 3. A drone that costs less than a used car, destroying infrastructure worth more than the building you're sitting in. So you don't miss what comes next. Drop a comment. Do you think passive defenses like netting can ever keep pace with drone technology? Or has Russia already lost this arms race? See you on the next one.